The last candle in the royal bedchamber had burned low enough to drown its wick in wax. Elara Vale sat at the edge of the untouched marriage bed, still wearing the ivory silk gown the kingdom had watched her marry Alpha King Cassian Thorne in only hours earlier. Silver thread caught the weak firelight along her sleeves. On her left hand, the lunar ring rested against her skin, a heavy band of white gold set with a pale moonstone. It should have felt warm by now. It didn't. Outside the chamber, distant music from the wedding feast had faded into scattered footsteps and closing doors. Dawn was still hours away. Cassian had been gone for 43 minutes. Elara knew because the carved clock above the hearth had become impossible to ignore. When the knock had come, Cassian had barely looked at her. A royal guard had whispered something near the door. Seraphine Holt. That name had changed his face. "She's upset," Cassian had said, fastening the collar of the black shirt he had only just removed. "I need to handle this." Elara had stared at him. Tonight. His jaw tightened. She sent word that someone threatened her after the ceremony. Then send Marcus. Cassian's eyes flashed with irritation. "Not everything requires an argument, Elara." She had said nothing after that. He had left. Now the mate bond beneath her ribs pulled like a wire drawn too tight. Elara rose. She walked through the royal wing without slippers, carrying them in one hand so her steps made no sound against the marble. Her wedding gown whispered around her ankles. Cassian's scent grew stronger near the eastern guest chambers. Rain, cedar, and the sharp metallic edge of an alpha's dominance. Then came Seraphine's scent. White roses. Elara stopped outside a closed mahogany door. 2 guards stood there. Neither met her eyes. That told her enough. Still, she asked, "Is the king inside?" The younger guard swallowed. "My Luna." I asked a question. "Yes." A woman's laugh drifted faintly through the wood. Not frightened. Not crying. Laughing. Elara's fingers curled around her slippers. "Inside." Cassian said something too low to hear. Seraphine answered, softer now. "You shouldn't have married her if you were going to look at me like that." A long pause followed. Elara waited for Cassian to correct her, to say Elara was his wife, his Luna, his chosen queen. Instead, she heard the scrape of furniture, then the click of the inner lock. The older guard finally looked at her. Pity sat in his eyes. Elara hated that more than the laughter. She turned away before either man could speak. Cassian did not know she had been outside. Seraphine never saw her. That was the only mercy Elara would accept from the night. Near dawn, Cassian remained absent. The sky beyond the tall windows had begun to pale from black to bruised gray when Elara entered Cassian's private office. The crown oath waited exactly where the royal clerk had left it. 3 sheets of vellum, Cassian's signature, the royal seal, 1 empty line beneath the title, Luna and Crown Witness. Elara stared at it for several seconds. The First Night Covenant had been dismissed by modern kings as ceremonial history. Elara had never made that mistake. If the crown oath remained incomplete at first light after a royal marriage, the Luna retained the right to withdraw consent and petition the Moon Tribunal for independent review. Cassian had once laughed when she explained the clause. No one has used that law in 200 years. Elara picked up the silver pen. Her hand shook once. She steadied it, not from fear, from the mate bond clawing at her chest while Cassian's scent still lingered elsewhere. She wrote 4 words beneath the unsigned line. Consent withdrawn, review invoked. Then she returned to the bedchamber. Elara removed the Luna ring slowly. A pale indentation circled her finger. She placed the ring on top of the crown oath, directly in the center of Cassian's side of the untouched bed. No farewell letter. No accusation. No request for explanation. She changed into a dark traveling dress, pulled on leather boots, and took one small satchel containing money, identification papers, and nothing bearing the royal crest. At the servant corridor, she paused once, not to look back, to listen. The kingdom was waking. Somewhere beyond the stone walls, bells announced the first edge of sunrise. Elara stepped into the passage and closed the hidden door behind her. 40 minutes later, Cassian returned smelling of white roses. He pushed open the bedchamber door. "Elara?" No answer. His eyes moved to the empty bed, then to the moonstone ring resting on parchment. Cassian stopped breathing. The first beam of dawn crossed the floor and touched the unsigned line. On his wedding bed, there was no wife waiting for him, only a Luna ring and a crown oath, missing the one signature his kingdom could not afford to lose. Elara reached the lower service gate, just as the first bells of morning began to ring across White Crown. The sound rolled over the palace roofs in slow bronze waves. One bell for sunrise, one bell for the royal marriage. A bitter choice of timing. She pulled the hood of her dark cloak lower and kept walking. Behind her, cooks were already opening kitchen shutters. Stable hands dragged feed carts across the courtyard. No one paid much attention to a woman using the servants' road before dawn. That invisibility had once irritated her. This morning, it saved her. Elara passed beneath the old stone archway and stepped beyond the inner royal grounds. Pain hit instantly. Not emotional pain. Something physical. A violent contraction seized behind her ribs, sharp enough to fold her forward. Her hand shot to the wall. The mate bond. Cassian had finally entered the bedchamber. She knew it without seeing him. The bond carried no words, but emotion traveled through it in broken flashes. Confusion. Disbelief. Then anger. Elara closed her eyes. For one humiliating second, another sensation followed. His panic. Her wolf reacted before her pride could stop it. A low whine stirred inside her chest. Go back. The instinct was ancient and stupid and cruel. Go back to him. Elara pushed away from the wall. No. The word came out rough. She forced herself down the service road. Each step stretched the bond tighter. At the palace, Cassian stood beside the untouched marriage bed, with Elara's Luna ring in his hand. The moonstone felt colder than it should have. Marcus Reed stood near the door, fully dressed despite the hour, his expression carefully neutral. Cassian read the words on the crown oath again. Consent withdrawn. Review invoked. His jaw flexed. She cannot invoke review over one night. Marcus did not answer immediately. That silence irritated him. Say it. Marcus looked at the parchment. She can. Cassian's gaze snapped up. Marcus continued carefully. First Night Covenant, Section 9. If the crown oath remains incomplete before first light, the Luna may suspend consent and petition the Moon Tribunal. Cassian stared at him. That law is ceremonial. So is half the throne room. Cassian's eyes narrowed. Marcus did not smile. Ceremonial does not mean invalid. Cassian threw the parchment onto the bed. She is angry. Marcus said nothing. She wants me to chase her. Still nothing. Cassian's voice hardened. Stop looking at me like that. I am trying not to. Cassian paced once toward the windows. Outside, the kingdom was beginning to celebrate his marriage. Flags bearing the White Crown crest hung from every tower. He looked down at the ring in his palm. Elara had removed it. That detail bothered him more than the legal language. He had expected fury, a confrontation, a demand that he explain, Seraphine, not absence. Send riders, he said. Marcus straightened. To bring her back? To find her. And if she refuses? Cassian turned. She is my Luna. Marcus's expression changed. Only slightly. Right now, legally, that may be exactly what is under review. Cassian's alpha aura flared. The air in the chamber tightened. Careful. Marcus held his ground. I am being careful. Cassian looked again at the empty side of the bed. He hated the quiet. Elara does not survive 3 days outside royal territory. Marcus's brow lifted. She negotiated a winter ceasefire between Frost River and Stone March at 27. That is politics. She also spent 6 months inspecting border stations. With guards. Marcus looked toward the open wardrobe. Only traveling clothes were missing. No jewels, no royal carriage, no escort, no obvious route. Cassian said nothing. Marcus lowered his voice. She planned faster than you think. That angered him more. By mid-morning, Elara was 12 miles from the palace. Rain began as a fine mist, coating the pine needles and turning the road slick. She left the main route at an abandoned shepherd's bridge and descended toward a narrow stream. The bond pain had worsened. Every few minutes, a hard pulse dragged through her sternum. She could feel Cassian searching now, not physically. Through the bond, his wolf was pushing against the connection, trying to locate her scent, her direction, anything. Elara knelt beside the stream. Her stomach twisted. She barely turned before she vomited into the wet grass. Nothing came up except water and a thin line of blood. She stared at the red streak for a moment, then wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. No tears. There was no time for them. She pulled the royal travel cloak from her satchel. Heavy wool, black, white crown insignia, stitched beneath the collar. The palace laundresses had washed it in cedar soap for years. Cassian would know the scent. So would every royal tracker. Elara gathered dry bark beneath a leaning rock, struck flint, and fed the tiny flame until it caught. The crest darkened first, then curled. Smoke rose into the rain. She watched the royal symbol burn without satisfaction. That surprised her. She had imagined freedom might feel dramatic. It felt mostly cold. Elara removed a small vial from her satchel and poured crushed juniper oil over her boots and wrists. It would not erase her scent. Nothing could. But combined with rain, running water, and smoke, it could confuse trackers long enough. She stepped into the stream. The water was glacial. Her breath caught. She walked downstream for nearly half a mile before climbing out onto the northern bank. A branch snapped somewhere behind her. Elara froze. Far back through the trees came the faint, rhythmic thud of horses. Royal riders. Cassian had moved faster than she expected. She turned toward the hills. The moon tribunal lay beyond them, 3 hours away if she kept to the road. Longer through forest. Another bond spasm tore through her. Elara staggered and caught herself against a pine trunk. For the first time, tears burned behind her eyes. Not because of pain, because somewhere deep in the bond, Cassian's wolf had sensed something raw enough to reach her. Come home. Elara pressed her forehead against the bark. The words were not spoken. That made them worse. Her body remembered his hands. His scent, the rare quiet nights when he stopped being king long enough to sleep with his face against her shoulder. She swallowed hard. Then she remembered the locked guest room door. Seraphine's laughter. The guard's pity. Elara stepped away from the tree. No. This time the word was steadier. Back at White Crown, a tracker knelt beside the shepherd's bridge. Her scent ends here. Cassian stood several feet away, rain collecting on the shoulders of his black coat. Marcus examined the burned remains of the cloak beneath the rock. She knew you would follow the crest. Cassian's expression went flat. The tracker pointed north. There is another possibility. Cassian looked toward him. The stream leads toward tribunal territory. Marcus inhaled slowly. Cassian understood before he spoke. No. Marcus looked at the gray horizon. If she reaches sanctuary, royal guard cannot remove her. I am the king. Not there. Cassian's wolf surged. He turned toward his horse. Ride. Elara saw the first white boundary stones near noon. Tall, narrow, carved with crescent symbols blackened by age. Moon Tribunal territory. Her legs were shaking badly now. Behind her, distant hoofbeats carried through the rain. Closer. Too close. Elara ran. The bond burned so hard her vision blurred. She stumbled once, tore the palm of her hand against gravel, and pushed herself upright. The first sanctuary pillar stood 50 yards ahead. 40, 30. A rider shouted behind her. Luna Elara. She did not turn. 20, 10. The instant her hand struck the cold white stone, a pulse of ancient power moved through the ground. The air changed. The hoofbeats stopped. Elara leaned against the pillar, chest heaving. Across the invisible boundary, 4 royal guards pulled their horses to a halt. None crossed. One of them looked furious. Another looked relieved. Elara lifted her bleeding hand from the stone. A thin crescent of silver light had appeared beneath her palm. Sanctuary accepted. For 72 hours. No more. Elara had escaped Cassian's reach, but if she could not prove her claim within 3 days, the law protecting her would become the law that delivered her back to him. The white stone beneath Elara's palm remained cold, even after the silver crescent faded. For several seconds, no one moved. Rain slid from the edge of her hood and struck the ground between her boots. On the opposite side of the sanctuary line, the 4 royal guards sat rigid in their saddles, horses steaming in the damp air. The youngest guard looked past Elara toward the rising walls of the Moon Tribunal. Luna Elara, he called. By order of Alpha King Cassian Thorne, you are requested to return to White Crown. Requested, not commanded. Elara almost smiled. Almost. My name is Elara Vale. The guard hesitated. She straightened despite the pain pulsing beneath her ribs. And I'm invoking sanctuary. The oldest rider dismounted and approached the boundary stone, stopping 2 steps short of it. You understand this protection is temporary. I do. If the tribunal rejects your petition, we escort you back. Elara met his eyes. If the tribunal rejects my petition, I will walk back under the law. You will not drag me anywhere. The man lowered his gaze. Understood. Elara turned away before her knees could betray how badly they were shaking. The Moon Tribunal stood on a plateau of pale granite surrounded by dark fir trees. Unlike White Crown Palace, it had no banners, no golden towers, no carved wolves announcing who ruled within. Only stone, wide steps, black iron doors, and a single bronze bell suspended above the entrance. Every person who crossed those doors entered without rank, at least in theory. Elara climbed the steps slowly. Her cut palm had begun to throb. A woman in gray robes waited inside. She was older, perhaps in her late 50s, with silver threaded through tightly braided dark hair. Her gaze dropped immediately to Elara's bleeding hand. Tessa Wynne, she said, keeper of records. Elara Vale. I know. Elara looked toward her. Tessa gave a dry glance at the wet wedding dress, hidden beneath the travel cloak. News travels quickly when a royal marriage collapses before breakfast. Elara's jaw tightened. Tessa noticed. Good. You still have teeth. She gestured down a stone corridor. Come. The interior smelled of cold limestone, ink, and old paper. Clerks moved quietly between archive rooms carrying leather-bound ledgers. No one bowed. No one called her Luna. The absence should have hurt. Instead, it felt strangely clean. Tessa brought her to a narrow chamber with a basin, fresh linen, and a wooden chair. Wash your hand. Elara obeyed. The water turned faintly pink. You have 72 hours, Tessa said. I know. Do you? Elara looked up. Tessa crossed her arms. Sanctuary protects you from removal. It does not protect you from law. You must establish that the crown violated a condition serious enough to justify independent review. First Night Covenant. Tessa's expression changed slightly. Most royals treat that clause as decorative. Most royals do not spend their childhood reading treaty annotations for entertainment. That sounds miserable. It was. For the first time, Tessa almost smiled. Then the door opened. The man who entered did not look like an alpha. That was Elara's first thought. He wore no ceremonial coat, no crest, no weapons beyond a plain silver knife at his belt. His dark hair was streaked with gray at the temples, and there was nothing physically theatrical about him. But the room shifted around his presence. Not dominance. Authority. Earned rather than imposed. Chief Arbiter Mercer, Tessa said. Rowan Mercer's eyes settled on Elara. 41, she guessed. His gaze was steady, analytical, and entirely unimpressed by her title. Good. She had no patience left for reverence. Miss Vale, Chief Arbiter, you requested protection under First Night Covenant. I invoked it. Different thing. Elara held his gaze. Invoking it creates a request for legal recognition. Good. Tessa stepped quietly toward the door. I'll leave you two to enjoy yourselves. Neither acknowledged the sarcasm. Rowan sat across from Elara and placed a thin black ledger on the table. Explain your claim. Cassian and I completed the public marriage rite last night. The crown oath was scheduled to be signed before dawn. It wasn't. No. Why? Because he left the royal wing. For what reason? Elara paused. The humiliation tasted worse when translated into legal language. To spend the night with Seraphine Holt. Rowan's expression did not soften. She was grateful for that. Do you have proof? 2 guards outside her chamber saw him enter and remain there. Witness testimony. Yes. Anything else? His scent, hers, the locked door. Not enough. Elara's eyes narrowed. You asked me to explain the claim. I'm explaining why it may fail. A spark of irritation cut through her exhaustion. He abandoned the marriage bed before the crown oath was completed. Abandonment is emotional language. It is also accurate. Accuracy is not evidence. Elara leaned forward. Then call the guards. I will. Rowan opened the ledger. But understand something before you make this into a case. The tribunal does not exist to punish husbands for being unfaithful. I am not asking you to punish him. What are you asking? To determine whether I retain the right to withdraw consent from an oath that was never completed. Rowan watched her carefully. And if the answer is yes, I remain here until review concludes. And if the answer is no, Elara's fingers curled beneath the table. Then I go back. The bond tightened at those words. A sudden wave of pain climbed her chest. She inhaled once through her nose. Rowan noticed. He said nothing. Good again. He turned another page. What exactly did you leave behind? The Luna ring. Symbolic. And the unsigned crown oath. That caught his attention. You wrote on it. Consent withdrawn. Review invoked. With what pen? The king's silver oath pen. Rowan went still. Elara noticed. Why does that matter? Instead of answering, Rowan closed the ledger. Show me your left hand. Her posture sharpened. Why? Your palm. Elara held it out. The cut from the gravel crossed beneath the base of her thumb. Faintly, almost hidden beneath the blood and rain irritation. A silver crescent still marked the skin from the sanctuary pillar. Rowan stared at it longer than necessary. What? He released her hand. Nothing yet. I dislike that phrase. You'll dislike the next one more. He stood. Your sanctuary stands for 72 hours. During that time, we verify the crown oath, summon witnesses, and determine whether the old covenant actually applies. Elara rose as well. And if Cassian arrives himself? He may enter tribunal grounds. Her stomach tightened. But he cannot command here. For the first time since leaving White Crown, Elara felt something close to relief. It lasted 3 seconds. Rowan moved to the door, then stopped. There is one more problem. What problem? The section you invoked was amended 183 years ago. Elara frowned. No, the amendment was repealed. That depends on which archive copy you read. She stared at him. Rowan's gaze sharpened. Someone removed the repeal from the White Crown version decades ago. The room suddenly felt colder. Elara stepped toward him. You're saying the law at White Crown is incomplete? I'm saying someone wanted future kings to believe it was. A bell rang somewhere deep inside the tribunal. Once, then twice. Tessa appeared at the end of the corridor, carrying a sealed document. Her face had lost all trace of dry humor. Rowan. He took the notice. The wax seal was white. Royal Council. He broke it. His eyes moved across the page. Then he looked at Elara. They've already filed against you. For what? Abandonment of crown duty. Elara stared at the seal. The rain outside beat harder against the windows. How fast? Rowan checked the registration line. His expression darkened. Too fast. Elara took the document from his hand. The filing time was stamped clearly beneath the council seal. Hours before she had reached the sanctuary. Hours before anyone outside the royal wing should have known she was gone. Someone at White Crown had prepared to accuse Elara of abandonment before she ever chose to leave. The council notice lay open beneath the tribunal lamp. Elara read the registration line a third time. 8 to us. She had still been inside White Crown Palace at 4:12. Still wearing her wedding dress. Still standing in Cassian's private office, with the unsigned crown oath in front of her. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the document. They filed before I crossed the royal boundary. Tessa Wynne stood beside a cabinet of sealed records, arms folded. Before you cross the inner courtyard, most likely. Rowan Mercer took the notice from Elara and held it closer to the lamp. The white wax seal carried the 7-point mark of the Royal Council. Perfect. Too perfect. No smudging, Rowan said. Elara looked at him. What does that tell you? That whoever prepared this had time. Tessa stepped closer. And access. Elara stared at the wording. Abandonment of crown duty. Failure to remain present for completion of royal obligations. Voluntary desertion of Luna office. Each accusation assumed she would leave. Not might. Would. They knew. Rowan's eyes stayed on the page. Or they were prepared for several outcomes. No. Elara's voice came sharper. They knew. She reached for the notice. Look at the second paragraph. Rowan read it. Elara pointed to one sentence. The Luna departed without completing crown oath. Tessa frowned. So? The unsigned oath was in Cassian's private office, until I moved it to the bedchamber. Silence. Elara continued. The council clerk could not know it remained unsigned unless someone inside the royal wing told them before dawn. Rowan's expression hardened. That narrows access. It should. Elara rose. The chair legs scraped softly against stone. I want the crown seal registry. Tessa blinked. The registry is restricted. So is filing treason-adjacent accusations before the alleged act occurs. That is not a recognized category. It should be. A tiny curve touched Rowan's mouth, then vanished. Tessa, the keeper sighed. You both enjoy making my mornings difficult. She crossed the chamber and unlocked a black iron cabinet. Inside rested 6 ledgers bound in pale leather. Tessa selected one. Seal registry, current year. She placed it on the table. Every royal council document required a numbered seal impression, logged by time, authorizing elder and clerk. Elara turned pages quickly. Her exhaustion disappeared beneath focus. She found the entry. Council Notice 84B. Registration time, 4/12. Authorizing elder, Gideon Holt. Her stomach dropped. Seraphine's father. Rowan saw it too. That matters. It matters too much. Elara traced the line without touching the ink. Gideon Holt had authorized the notice while his daughter was behind a locked door with Cassian. Not after scandal spread. During it, Tessa leaned over. There's more. She tapped the clerk code. Elara followed her finger. No. She knew that designation. Council Clerk 9 works the Western Archive Office. Tessa nodded. Not the Royal Wing, which means someone delivered information directly. Rowan closed the registry. Or the notice was drafted in advance and only activated when Gideon gave the order. Elara looked at him. That is worse. Yes. A deep ache tightened beneath her sternum. The mate bond again. She pressed 2 fingers lightly against her ribs. This time the pain carried something else. Heat. Agitation. Cassian. He was angry. Not at her. Not entirely. Elara hated that she could still distinguish the difference. At White Crown, Cassian stood in the council chamber, with the notice clenched in his hand. Gideon Holt sat 3 seats down, calm as polished stone. You filed this before I authorized any action. Cassian's voice was controlled. Marcus stood behind his right shoulder. Seraphine sat near her father. She looked pale. Gideon folded his hands. The council acted to protect continuity. You accused my wife of abandoning crown duty before I knew she was gone. Gideon did not flinch. The possibility was obvious. Cassian's stare sharpened. Was it? Seraphine shifted in her chair. Cassian noticed. Gideon continued. Elara Vale has always been politically ambitious. Marcus's head turned slightly. Cassian's wolf bristled. She left a ring and invoked review. Exactly. That proves she knows the law. It proves she intended to use it. Cassian stepped closer to the table. Careful, Gideon. The elder's eyes lowered respectfully. But not enough. Seraphine spoke. Cassian, perhaps father only wanted to prevent panic. He looked at her. Her voice softened. You know how people talk. Something in him recoiled. Hours earlier, that voice had pulled him into a locked guest chamber. Now he heard calculation where he had once heard fragility. Marcus placed a second paper on the table. Your Majesty. Cassian glanced down. A copy of the seal registry. For to duel Assam. He looked at Gideon. For the first time, the elder's expression changed. Barely, but enough. Back at the tribunal, Elara and Tessa moved deeper into the archive vault. Rows of old law books stretched beneath low stone arches. Dust hung in the lamplight. They searched for the First Night Covenant Amendment. Rowan remained near the entrance, reviewing the council filing. Elara found the correct century, then the correct reign. Volume 17. She pulled the ledger free. The spine cracked softly. There. The amendment appeared halfway through the section. King Alaric IV had limited independent review after several noble houses abused it. Elara turned the page. Nothing. She turned another. Nothing. Her pulse quickened. The repeal should be here. Tessa moved beside her. It is in the Tribunal Master Index, but not in the copied volume. Elara examined the binding. One section sat slightly uneven. She ran a fingernail along the inner seam. A page had been removed. Not recently. Decades ago. Rowan approached. Can you prove the repeal existed? Tessa was already walking toward another cabinet. We can if the master copy survived. She returned with a narrow cedar box. Inside lay a roll of parchment sealed with dark blue wax. Tribunal authority. Tessa broke the storage thread. Elara unfolded it carefully. There it was. The repeal. Valid. Signed. Never revoked. The First Night Covenant remained enforceable. Elara exhaled. For one brief moment, relief loosened her shoulders. Then she noticed the witness line. A familiar family name appeared beside the seal. Vale. Her eyes narrowed. Rowan saw the change. What? Elara shook her head. Latter. She needed facts before questions. Tessa carried both documents to the light. The missing repeal proves White Crown's archive is incomplete. Not necessarily intentionally. Rowan's tone was cautious. Elara looked at him. You don't believe that? No. A clerk knocked at the archive door. Chief Arbiter. Rowan turned. The young man held another sealed message. From White Crown. Elara's stomach tightened. The clerk handed it over. Rowan broke the seal. His eyes moved quickly over the lines, then stopped. What now? Elara asked. King Cassian requests permission to enter tribunal territory. The bond beneath her ribs flared so suddenly she lost a breath. Tessa noticed. Elara straightened. When? He is already at the outer gate. The room went still. Rowan folded the message. He cannot command you here. I know. He can ask to speak. I know. Tessa watched her carefully. Do you want to? Elara looked down at the council notice. Then the missing page. Then the repeal carrying her family name. No. Her voice was quiet, firm. Not yet. A second knock came. The same clerk had returned, visibly unsettled. There's something else. Rowan frowned. The clerk held out a second paper. A council courier arrived behind the king. Elara took it herself. Another accusation. Another official seal. This one claimed she had conspired with the Moon Tribunal before the wedding. Her gaze dropped to the registration stamp. 3:30 AM. Earlier than the first. Earlier than Cassian had even left Seraphine's room. Elara lifted her eyes. They didn't react to me leaving. Rowan said nothing. They were waiting for it. Outside, somewhere beyond the archive walls, the tribunal bell rang 3 times. A royal arrival. Cassian had come. But Elara was no longer thinking about her husband. She was thinking about Gideon Holt, about missing law, about notices prepared before crimes existed, and about one question she could no longer ignore. If the council had expected her to run before she decided to run, what exactly had they expected Cassian to do that night? The betrayal had begun to look less like a private sin and more like the first move in a plan someone had written before Elara ever walked down the wedding aisle. Cassian stood beneath the black iron arch of the Moon Tribunal and waited for a door that did not open. That alone was enough to sour his temper. At White Crown, doors opened before his hand reached them. Guards straightened when he entered a hall. Counselors stopped speaking when he looked at them. Here, rain collected along the shoulders of his coat, while a tribunal officer read his request as though it had come from an ordinary petitioner. Marcus stood half a step behind him. This is ridiculous. It is procedure. Cassian cut him a look. Marcus wisely said nothing else. The tribunal officer returned from inside. Chief Arbiter Mercer acknowledges your arrival. Cassian's jaw tightened. And Miss Vale declines a private meeting at this time. For 1 second, the rain seemed louder. Cassian stared at the man. Miss Vale, that is how she registered under sanctuary. She is the Luna of White Crown. Her title is currently under review. Cassian's wolf surged so hard his fingers curled. Marcus stepped closer. Cassian. The warning was quiet. Not here. Cassian knew. That made it worse. He looked past the officer, toward the pale stone building. She knows I am here. Yes. And she still refuses? Yes. The answer landed harder than Cassian expected. He had imagined anger, even hatred. He had not imagined Elara simply deciding he no longer deserved access to her. Tell her I will wait. The officer hesitated. For how long? Cassian looked at the closed doors. As long as necessary. Marcus exhaled through his nose. For once, he did not point out that kings rarely waited for anything. Inside the tribunal, Elara sat before a library table covered in open volumes. She had heard the arrival bells. 3 slow strikes. Royal presence. She had also felt Cassian through the mate bond the instant he crossed into tribunal territory. Frustration. Possession. Something dangerously close to hurt. Elara pressed her thumb against the base of her cut palm until the physical sting overrode the bond. Across from her, Rowan Mercer placed a folded piece of parchment on the table. You are avoiding the west window. Elara did not look up. The west window overlooks the gate. Yes, I know. So you are avoiding it. I am working. Rowan sat down. Those things are not mutually exclusive. Elara finally looked at him. You always this irritating. Only when I am correct. Despite herself, A breath of amusement escaped her. It disappeared quickly. Rowan slid the parchment toward her. What is this? Read it. The page was old. The ink had faded brown. Elara recognized the handwriting before she reached the signature. Her own, not literally, but close enough that her chest tightened. The narrow slant, the habit of underlining legal contradictions twice, the small note in the margin, authority without review becomes habit. Habit eventually calls itself law. Elara stared. I wrote something almost identical. You did. She looked up. Rowan leaned back. 6 years ago, a correspondent calling herself E.V. The room went quiet. Elara glanced again at the paper. You kept these? Some. Why? Because whoever wrote them had the irritating tendency to notice holes in tribunal opinions before my junior arbiters did. That sounds useful. It was humiliating. Elara almost smiled again. Rowan pointed to the margin. You challenged our interpretation of pack asylum law after the Northmore case. You were wrong. I know. That must have been difficult. It remains devastating. This time she did smile. Briefly. It felt strange. Not wrong. Just unfamiliar. Rowan's expression softened by a fraction. You stopped writing 2 years ago. Elara looked back at the page. I became more involved at White Crown. Meaning Cassian. Meaning the kingdom. Rowan did not argue. That restraint made the next thought hurt more. For years, she had sent anonymous legal analyses to the tribunal because she wanted the law to work better. No title attached. No Luna ring. No political reward. Rowan had remembered the mind behind the letters. Cassian had lived beside that same mind and often called her work paperwork. Elara closed the parchment. That version of me had more time. No. Rowan's voice was calm. She had fewer people taking credit for it. Elara looked at him sharply. He did not apologize. A clerk entered before she could answer. Chief Arbiter. Rowan turned. The young man handed him a sealed field report. From Frost River. Rowan broke the seal. His eyes moved over the page. Then he handed it to Elara. She read the first line. By authority of Frost River Pack, troop mobilization to White Crown is suspended pending completion of lawful crown oath. Elara's stomach dropped. No. Rowan watched her. Alpha Jonah Pierce has invoked Article 12. I can read. Her voice came sharper than intended. She stood and moved toward the shelves. Article 12 allowed a vassal pact to suspend military contribution if the crown's dual oath remained incomplete beyond sunrise after royal union. It had not been used in generations, because there had been no need. Until now. This is not what I wanted. Rowan remained seated. What did you want? Distance. Law does not stop at the edge of personal intention. She turned. If other packs follow Jonah, the northern border weakens. Yes. If Black Ridge sees that, they will test it. And Cassian will think I engineered this. Did you? No. Then his assumption is his problem. It becomes everyone's problem if he answers politically. Rowan studied her. You still protect him. Elara's expression hardened. I protect the people who will bleed if 2 alpha egos turn a legal dispute into a border war. Good. She frowned. Good? That is why your opinion matters. Before Elara could answer, the mate bond tightened. Not rage this time. Shock. Cassian had heard. At the gate, Marcus held the same Frost River message. Cassian read it once. Then again. They refused. Marcus nodded. Jonah invoked Article 12. He has obeyed every mobilization order for 15 years. Because every prior crown oath was complete. Cassian crushed the edge of the paper in his hand. This is Elara. Marcus's eyes narrowed. You think she contacted Jonah? She knows him. She knows every alpha in the kingdom. That was part of her job. Cassian looked toward the tribunal doors. She knew this would happen. Maybe. Then why didn't she warn me? Marcus held his gaze. You laughed when she warned you about old law. Cassian went still. A memory surfaced. Elara in his office, months earlier, surrounded by ledgers. Cassian leaning against the desk. Ancient clauses again? She had looked up. Old law only becomes useless when everyone agrees to forget it. He had kissed her forehead, then told her to come to bed. Cassian's throat tightened. At the time, he had thought he was being affectionate. Now the memory felt dismissive. Inside, Elara returned to the table. Rowan had opened another file. What now? She asked. Now we determine whether Frost River is the first pack to act or merely the first to say it aloud. Elara looked at the report again. If this spreads, Cassian could lose operational control. Yes, and if he tries to override Article 12, he risks legitimizing the review. She rubbed a hand over her face. This is becoming larger than the marriage. It always was. Elara lowered her hand. Rowan tapped the old letter bearing EV. You wrote that 6 years ago. She glanced down. Authority without review becomes habit. Her own words. Returning now like a verdict. Another bell sounded in the corridor. Not 3 strikes. 1, then 1 again. Messenger protocol. Tessa entered carrying a second report. This came from Stone March. Elara's pulse quickened. Tessa set it beside the first. Stone March pack had suspended tax transfer, pending Crown clarification. Rowan looked at Elara. She looked at the 2 seals. Frost River, Stone March, 2 packs. In one morning, White Crown had never looked fragile to her before, not even during war. But power, she was beginning to understand, could crack without a sword ever leaving its sheath. At the gate, Cassian received the Stone March report seconds later. His face went blank. Marcus read over his shoulder. Neither man spoke. Cassian turned toward the tribunal. Somewhere inside that building, Elara was reading the same message. For the first time since she vanished, he no longer wondered when she would come home. He wondered whether White Crown could continue pretending nothing had changed if she did not. Then a third messenger rode through the rain, carrying the crest of another vassal pack, and Cassian knew the empty Luna chair had just become a kingdom-wide problem. The 2 Alphas arrived at Moon Tribunal before noon, and neither came to negotiate. Alpha Brenner Cole of Ironvale entered first, broad-shouldered, gray-haired, and furious enough that his wolf pressed visibly against his eyes. Alpha Mason Rourke of Pine Hollow followed 10 seconds later, with 3 warriors at his back. The moment they saw each other across the tribunal chamber, the air changed. You moved your boundary stones, Mason said. Brenner laughed once. A hard sound. You sent patrols across my land. That land is mine, according to a map your father paid to have redrawn. Mason took 1 step forward. A low growl rolled through the room. Tribunal guards immediately moved between them. Rowan Mercer remained behind the central table, expression flat. If either of you shifts inside my chamber, I will have you sedated like badly trained pups. Brenner looked offended. Mason looked tempted. Elara stood beside a long table, covered with territorial ledgers, survey records, and 2 contradictory maps. She had slept perhaps an hour. Her palms still hurt. The mate bond still pulsed beneath her ribs. None of that mattered now. If Ironvale and Pine Hollow fought, 3 farming settlements sat directly between their patrol routes. Families lived there. Children, people who had nothing to do with crown politics. Elara placed both maps side by side. These cannot both be legal. Mason looked at her. And you are? Elara Vale. Recognition moved across his face. The runaway Luna. Rowan's gaze sharpened. Elara did not blink. The woman currently preventing you from starting a border war over badly copied ink. Brenner coughed into his fist. It might have hidden a laugh. Mason's mouth tightened. Elara pointed to the newer map. This version puts the Cedar Run east of the boundary. It has for 23 years, Mason said. No. She pulled an older territorial ledger closer. The river moved. Brenner frowned. Rivers do that. Law notices. She opened the ledger. The original treaty defines the boundary by fixed stone markers, not the current river channel. Mason leaned forward. Those markers are gone. 2 are. Elara tapped a note, written in faded red ink. The 3rd was incorporated into a shrine wall after the flood of year 318. Rowan looked up. Where? Elara turned the map. Here. A tiny abandoned settlement lay between both territories. Ash Hollow. Mason shook his head. That village has been empty for decades. Empty does not mean irrelevant. Brenner folded his arms. So we ride to a dead shrine and hope an old rock solves this? No. Elara reached for the tax ledger. We check whether the crown recognized that marker after the flood. She flipped through several pages, then stopped. There, a notation from the Royal Survey Office. Boundary reaffirmed by 3rd stone at Ash Hollow Shrine. Signed, sealed, valid. Mason went silent. Brenner leaned closer. Elara continued reading. The next line had been added 11 years later. Boundary adjusted following revised watercourse survey. No alpha signatures. No tribunal witness. No pack ratification. Only one council authorization mark. Rowan saw it first. Holt. Elara's fingers froze over the page. Gideon Holt. Again. Mason's anger changed direction. You're telling me council altered territory without pack signatures? I'm telling you someone recorded an adjustment without the legal approvals required to make it binding. Brenner looked at Mason. For the first time since entering the chamber, neither man looked ready to tear out the other's throat. Mason pointed to the ledger. My patrols have been defending that strip for 11 years, and mine have been paying tax on half of it. Brenner snapped. That sounds like White Crown benefited twice, Rowan said. Silence followed. Elara looked at the figures. Iron Vale had paid land tax. Pine Hollow had funded patrol maintenance. 2 packs charged for the same territory under conflicting records. That was not clerical incompetence. It was useful confusion, and someone had preserved it for over a decade. Mason's voice dropped. How many other boundaries were adjusted by council authorization alone? No one answered, because now everyone was thinking the same thing. Elara closed the ledger. This dispute is suspended until Ash Hollow is inspected. Neither pack sends armed patrols into the contested strip. Civilian access continues. Tribunal escorts will verify the surviving marker. Brenner looked at Rowan. She can order that? No, Rowan said. Elara met his eyes. Rowan continued. But I can. He stamped the temporary ruling. The impact of the seal against paper was small. The effect was not. Mason stared at Elara for a long moment. You found in 20 minutes what White Crown surveyors missed for 11 years. Elara looked down at the altered entry. No. Her voice turned quiet. They didn't miss it. Across the table, Rowan's expression changed. That was the darker possibility. At White Crown, Cassian sat in his private office, with 3 unopened mobilization refusals, stacked beside Elara's Luna ring. Marcus entered without knocking. Cassian did not complain. What now? Iron Vale and Pine Hollow nearly went to war. Cassian looked up sharply. Over what? Boundary dispute. I know that dispute. Survey office. Settled it. Years ago. Marcus placed a fresh report on the desk. The tribunal disagrees. Cassian read. His eyes stopped on Elara's name. Temporary settlement proposed by Elara Vale. He read the line again. She is involving herself in pack territory now? She prevented fighting. Cassian's jaw tightened. Rowan Mercer allowed her to issue crown-level interpretation while she is under review. She found the record. Mercer issued the ruling. Cassian pushed back from the desk. Convenient. Marcus looked at him. Cassian caught the expression. What? You keep using that word every time she proves useful somewhere you are not. Cassian stood. Watch yourself. Marcus did not retreat. You asked me to investigate Gideon. And? Marcus tapped the report. The altered boundary entry was authorized by Gideon Holt. Cassian went still. His gaze dropped slowly to the page. The same name. The same elder. Seraphine's father. Cassian looked toward the Luna ring. For several seconds, he did not touch it. Then he remembered Elara standing beside a map 6 months earlier, explaining why disputed land records needed independent verification. He had been dressing for a hunt. You worry too much, he had told her. She had replied without looking up. And you benefit from it. At the time, he had smiled. Now the memory left no room for humor. Back at Moon Tribunal, Tessa Wynne appeared at the archive door, carrying a narrow leather folder. Elara. Elara turned from the territorial ledger. Tessa's face was unusually serious. I found something attached to the repeal record. Rowan joined them. Tessa placed the folder on the table and opened it. Inside lay a brittle genealogy page. Elara recognized her mother's name immediately. Evelyn Vale. Beneath it was a seal she had never seen in any Vale family record. A silver crescent, crossed by a vertical line. Rowan stopped breathing for half a second. Elara noticed. What is that? He did not answer immediately. Tessa did. Moon witness. Elara frowned. That bloodline died out. So the public records say. Elara stared at her mother's name. The room seemed to narrow around the page. Below Evelyn Vale was another name. Elara Vale. Her own. Stamped beside it was the same ancient seal. Rowan looked at her differently now. Not as a runaway Luna. Not even as EV, as something older, more dangerous. Elara touched the edge of the genealogy page. Why was this hidden? Tessa turned over the final sheet. Someone had removed the official bloodline designation from White Crown's copied records. Again, another missing truth. Another altered archive. Another connection to a law someone, clearly, wanted forgotten. Elara looked at Rowan. What exactly does a moon witness have the right to do? His expression was grim, more than you were ever supposed to find out. Outside, thunder rolled over the tribunal plateau, and far away at White Crown, Cassian stood over a map Elara had once warned him not to trust. The woman he had treated like a replaceable Luna was beginning to uncover evidence that her bloodline had been built into the law of his crown. Cassian had stopped pretending the empty Luna chair did not matter. It sat to his left in the council chamber, untouched since the wedding. No one had been formally permitted to occupy it. That had not stopped Seraphine from trying. She entered late, dressed in pale blue, with a silver clasp at her throat that carried the Holt family crest. 3 council members rose for her. Marcus did not. Cassian watched as she moved toward the vacant chair. His expression changed. Not that one. Seraphine stopped. The room tightened. She looked at him. Cassian, that seat belongs to the recognized Luna. A faint flush climbed her neck. You said Elara abandoned the role. I said nothing of the kind. Gideon Holt folded his hands over the table. Your Majesty, continuity matters. The kingdom cannot display uncertainty. Cassian looked at him. Then perhaps the council should stop creating it. A small silence followed. Seraphine remained standing. For the first time in years, Cassian saw the scene from outside himself. Her careful clothes, her father's calm face, the empty chair, and Elara nowhere in the room. Months earlier, that chair had been occupied by a woman who rarely interrupted unless she had already read every document on the table. He had found that annoying. Now the silence where her voice should have been irritated him more. Marcus set 3 sealed reports before him. Frost River, Stone March, Silver Glen. Cassian opened the first. Troop mobilization suspended. The second, tax transfer delayed. The third, council compliance review requested. His jaw tightened. 3 packs. 4, Marcus said. Cassian looked up. Red Hollow sent notice an hour ago. Seraphine's eyes flicked toward her father. Cassian noticed. Gideon spoke smoothly. This is exactly why the kingdom needs an acting Luna. Marcus turned toward him. Under what authority? Gideon's expression cooled. Common sense. Marcus pulled a slim ledger from beneath the reports. Elara annotated this section 2 years ago. Cassian glanced down. Royal succession and temporary Luna authority. Marcus opened to a marked passage. A neat line of black ink ran beside the text. No acting Luna may be seated while the crown oath remains under independent review. Seraphine stared at the handwriting. Cassian recognized it instantly. Elara's. A memory came back so clearly that it made his chest tighten. She had been sitting cross-legged in his private office, surrounded by books. He had walked in after midnight. You're still doing this? She had looked up. Someone has to. He had kissed the top of her head and told her not to stay up too late. Then he had gone to bed. Alone. At the time, he had thought the gesture was tenderness. Now he wondered how often affection had been his excuse for not listening. Gideon tapped one finger against the table. An annotation is not law. No, Marcus said. But the law, she annotated, is. Seraphine stepped away from the chair. No one invited her to another. At Moon Tribunal, Elara sat across from Rowan Mercer with the Moon Witness genealogy between them. Her mother's name still seemed wrong on the page. Not false. Wrong in the way a familiar face looks wrong in an old portrait. Tessa confirmed the seal, Elara asked. She did. And there is no possibility it was added later? No. Rowan leaned back. The registration marks are older than your birth. Elara stared at the document. So my mother knew? Likely. And never told me. Rowan's expression softened slightly. She may have had reasons. Elara gave him a dry look. Everyone seems to have reasons lately. That earned the faintest hint of amusement. Then it disappeared. Rowan tapped the page. Moon witnesses were not rulers. What were they? Checks. On the crown? On everyone. Elara looked up. They authenticated royal oaths, succession claims, emergency war powers, and certain bloodline declarations. Dot. Dot. Her stomach tightened. And if the witness refused, the crown could still exist. Rowan paused, but its disputed authority became reviewable by every vassal pack. Elara exhaled slowly. So Cassian's problem is not that I left. No, it is that the kingdom never completed the legal structure of the marriage. Correct. Elara looked down at her mother's seal. And because I am a witness, you were never merely signing as Luna. The words landed harder than she expected. She had thought the marriage gave her legal value. The truth was beginning to look opposite. She had brought legal value into the marriage. Tessa entered with another ledger. I found something else. Elara almost laughed. Of course you did. Tessa placed the book down. White Crown requested a witness verification 29 years ago. Rowan straightened. For what? Emergency, succession. Elara turned pages until she found the entry. Witness present. Identity sealed. Authorization granted. She looked at Tessa. Who? Tessa said nothing. That was answer enough. Elara looked back at her mother's name. Evelyn. Tessa nodded. Elara's throat tightened. Her mother had spent years telling her never to trust titles, never to assume law protected people merely because it was written. Elara had thought those were lessons from hardship. Now they sounded like warnings from experience. A knock came at the door. A tribunal messenger entered. For Miss Vale. Elara took the folded note. White Crown seal. She nearly set it aside. Then she noticed Marcus Reed's personal mark beneath it. Not Cassian's. She opened it. Only 2 lines. We found irregularities in Holt-authorized records. Cassian has ordered an internal inquiry. Elara read the message again. Rowan watched her. He is finally looking. Yes. How does that feel? Elara folded the note carefully. Late. At White Crown, Cassian stood alone in his office. After the council meeting, the 4 reports lay open on his desk. So did Elara's old ledgers. He had pulled 6 of them from the archive. Every one contained notes, warnings, corrections, names of pack leaders whose tempers needed managing, supply routes likely to fail during winter, legal clauses that could become dangerous if ignored. He had always known she worked hard. That was not the same as understanding what she had been doing. Marcus entered quietly. Cassian did not look up. How much of this did she handle? Marcus stopped. What? Cassian gestured to the books. How much? Marcus looked at the open pages. More than you wanted to know. Cassian's jaw tightened. That is not an answer. It is the honest one. Cassian turned another page. 3 years earlier, Elara had prevented a tariff dispute from becoming an alliance collapse. He remembered the week. He had been hunting with 2 visiting alphas. She had told him afterward that the matter was resolved. He had thanked her, then forgotten it. His fingers stopped on another note. If Silver Glen is pressured publicly, they will resist. Give them a private concession. Cassian closed his eyes. Silver Glen was now demanding review. Marcus placed a thin evidence envelope on the desk. We searched Seraphine's rooms. Cassian opened his eyes. Marcus's expression was grim. We found this behind the lining of her writing desk. He handed over a folded sheet. Cassian unfolded it. The first paragraph looked familiar. Very familiar. Because he had read a version of it 3 nights before the wedding. The letter that claimed Elara intended to use the crown oath to control military appointments. The letter that had made him angry enough to question her motives. The letter Seraphine had said came from a frightened council clerk. This version was unfinished. Several lines had been crossed out. 1 sentence had been rewritten twice. And at the bottom, in the margin, were practice strokes. Seraphine's handwriting. Cassian went very still. Marcus did not speak. The mate bond flared violently beneath Cassian's ribs. Not Elara's pain this time. His. He had believed the letter. He had carried that suspicion into the wedding. He had looked at Elara and wondered whether she loved him or wanted influence. Then Seraphine had sent for him, and he had gone. Cassian folded the draft with shaking fingers. Bring her. Marcus nodded. When Seraphine entered the office 10 minutes later, she saw the paper immediately. All color left her face. Cassian placed it on the desk between them. What is this? She stared. Cassian. What is it? Her mouth opened, closed. For the first time, no tears came. No soft voice. No careful explanation. Only fear. Cassian looked at the woman he had chosen to comfort on his wedding night, then at the forged letter that had helped him justify leaving his wife. His voice dropped. Did you write it? Seraphine whispered one word. Yes. The bond beneath his ribs twisted, and for the first time, Cassian did not blame Elara for being gone. He looked at Seraphine and understood that the night he thought he was choosing between two women, someone else had already chosen the lie he would believe. Seraphine did not sit. Cassian had offered her the chair twice. She remained standing in front of his desk, pale hands clasped so tightly that the knuckles had gone white. The forged letter lay between them. Marcus stood near the fireplace. No guards, no council members, no father. For the first time, Seraphine had nowhere to perform. Cassian watched her carefully. You wrote it? Yes. Her voice barely carried. Why? Seraphine looked toward the window. Rain had stopped, leaving the glass streaked in gray. Because my father told me to. Cassian's jaw hardened. That is not an answer. It is the only one you're going to like. His wolf stirred beneath his skin. Try me. Seraphine finally looked at him. 3 months ago, my father told me the marriage to Elara could not be allowed to complete cleanly. Marcus shifted. Cassian did not. Why? He said she was dangerous. A humorless sound left Cassian. Elara. Not physically. Seraphine swallowed. He said her family carried an old legal claim. Something buried in the crown records. Something that could weaken the council if the marriage oath was completed. Ha! Cassian's face went still. You knew this before the wedding. I knew pieces. How many pieces did it take before you decided to forge evidence against my wife? Seraphine flinched. Cassian saw it and felt nothing. That frightened him more than anger would have. She lowered her voice. My father controls my inheritance. Marcus's expression hardened. Seraphine continued. He controls my brother's rank, his marriage, his place in the pack, everything. So you framed Elara. He told me if I refused, my brother would be expelled from Holt territory. Cassian stared at her. And becoming queen? Seraphine's silence answered first. He leaned back slowly. There it is. Her eyes flashed. You think wanting security makes me a monster? No. Cassian's voice stayed cold. Forging evidence does. Seraphine's chin trembled. I thought, once Elara was gone, you would need someone beside you. And my crown? She looked away. What did Gideon promise you? That the council would recognize me as acting Luna. Marcus gave a quiet, bitter laugh. Seraphine turned toward him. What? Marcus stepped away from the fireplace. There is no legal path for that while independent review is active. I know that now. Cassian's eyes narrowed. Now? Seraphine looked back at him. My father never intended me to hold the position for long. The room tightened. Marcus spoke first. What did he intend? Seraphine's breathing changed. Cassian saw genuine fear this time. Not performance. They were going to use the instability. Who is they? My father, Elder Voss, Elder Marin, maybe 2 others. Use it for what? To trigger a crown review. Marcus went still. Cassian's voice dropped. A review can suspend royal authority. Yes, and if enough packs refused me, they would declare you unable to govern. Cassian stared at her. Seraphine's eyes filled with tears. They never wanted me as queen. No one comforted her. She wiped at her face angrily. I was supposed to help break the marriage. Then once you lost enough support, the council would take emergency control. Marcus looked toward Cassian. The king's face had emptied of expression. That was always worse than rage. They used you, Cassian said. Seraphine gave a broken laugh. And I helped them. Across the kingdom, Elara stood inside the Moon Tribunal archive, holding a document that could destroy the crown. Rowan Urser had placed it before her, without ceremony. 3 pages. Ancien vellum. Moon Witness Authority. Tessa stood behind him, with both hands resting on the back of a chair. Elara read the final clause twice. Then a 3rd time. If a royal oath is entered under manipulation, false witness, or concealed council interference, a living moon witness may suspend recognition of the crown. Rowan nodded. For review. How long? Until the vassal packs vote. Elara looked up. That could take months. Yes, and during those months, Cassian retains personal alpha authority over White Crown Pack, but not command over the 11 vassal packs. Correct. Elara set the document down. That would fracture the kingdom. It could. Could? Rowan's expression stayed grim. 3 packs have already suspended obligations. 2 more filed conditional notices this morning, Tessa added quietly. Black Ridge scouts were seen near the northern road. Elara closed her eyes for half a second. There it was. The choice Council had created. Use the law and risk war. Ignore it and preserve a crown they had already corrupted. Rowan watched her. You do not have to decide today. Yes, I do. Why? Because men with armies are already deciding for me. She stepped toward the map wall. 5 vassal territories were marked with fresh red pins. She had spent years studying those borders. She knew which villages would burn first if the packs mobilized. Not palaces, not council estates, farm roads, market towns, places where no one cared who slept with whom on a wedding night. Elara stared at the map. I wanted out. Rowan said nothing. I wanted distance from Cassian, from the council, from all of it. Her voice remained steady, but her fingers tightened at her sides. Now if I walk away, they may use that too. Tessa spoke gently. You are not responsible for choices other people make. No. Elara looked at the red pins. But I am responsible for what I know. Rowan studied her for several seconds. That is why the witness line mattered. Elara turned. What? They were never powerful, because they could break crowns. He tapped the ancient document. They mattered, because they were expected to know when not to. The words irritated her. That sounds dangerously close to sainthood. It was mostly paperwork and death threats. Tessa snorted. Elara almost smiled. Almost. Then the tribunal doors opened. A messenger entered carrying 2 sealed packets. One from White Crown, one from Frost River. Rowan took the Frost River message. Elara opened the White Crown one. Marcus's mark again. This time the note was longer. Seraphine confessed. Council members planned to exploit the failed oath and suspend Cassian through emergency review. Evidence secured. Gideon is attempting to leave White Crown. Elara read the final line. Cassian requests crown trial under tribunal authority. She looked up. Rowan had finished the Frost River message. What? Jonah Pierce is mobilizing defensive troops. Elara's stomach tightened. Against whom? Black Ridge crossed 2 miles into disputed northern territory. Tessa whispered a curse. The room moved all at once. Rowan began issuing orders. Messengers were summoned. Maps unrolled. Tribunal guards prepared departure lists. Elara remained still for 1 second longer. Then she folded Marcus's message. Call the 11 pack representatives. Rowan looked at her. You are invoking witness authority. Not yet. What are you doing? Elara picked up the ancient crown document. Giving Cassian 1 chance to expose the council before the kingdom pays for his mistake. Tessa watched her carefully. And if he fails? Alara's gaze dropped to the moon witness seal. Then I suspend the crown. The mate bond tightened beneath her ribs. Far away, Cassian felt it. Not pain. Decision. He looked down at the Luna ring still resting on his desk. For the first time, he understood that Elara was no longer choosing whether to return to him. She was choosing whether his throne deserved to survive. By nightfall, Elara possessed enough authority to save Cassian's crown, or legally strip it of the power every alpha in the kingdom had sworn to obey. By noon, every major pack in White Crown Kingdom had sent a representative to the Great Hall. No music greeted them. No banners had been lowered for ceremony. The hall looked exactly as it had on Elara's wedding day, but the air carried none of the warmth. 11 alpha crests hung above the stone columns. Tribunal guards stood along both walls. At the center of the chamber, a long black table held the evidence that had brought the kingdom to this point. The forged letter, the altered territorial ledger, the council notices registered before Elara had left White Crown, the original First Night Covenant repeal, and the Moon Witness seal. Cassian stood beside the throne instead of sitting on it. That choice did not escape anyone's attention. Marcus remained at his right. Seraphine stood near the witness bench, pale and rigid, with 2 tribunal officers behind her. Gideon Holt was brought in last. His wrists were not chained. Rowan had refused to make the trial look like an execution before evidence was heard. Gideon still entered as though the hall belonged to him. Then the doors opened again. Elara walked in. No crown, no royal gown, no Luna ring. She wore dark gray tribunal clothes beneath a simple black coat. Her hair was pulled back, exposing the faint exhaustion beneath her eyes. Every alpha in the hall rose. Elara stopped. For one brief second, her gaze met Cassian's. The mate bond pulled hard between them. Cassian felt relief so violent, it almost looked like pain. Elara felt it too. She looked away first, not because she was weak, because this was not about them yet. Rowan entered behind her and struck the tribunal's staff once against the floor. Crown trial is now in session. The hall settled. Gideon smiled faintly. This is theater. Rowan looked at him. You may discover you dislike the ending. Tessa Wynne carried the first ledger forward. She opened it to Council Notice 84B. Registered at 4:12 a.m. on the morning following the royal wedding. She placed the second notice beside it. Registered at 3:36 a.m. Alpha Jonah Pierce leaned forward. Elara had not left the palace then. No, Tessa said. Gideon lifted one shoulder. Contingency paperwork. Elara spoke for the first time. For an event that had not occurred. Gideon looked at her. For instability we expected. Why did you expect it? You were always difficult. A low murmur moved through the hall. Elara did not react. Difficult women do not automatically abandon royal marriages before dawn. Gideon's eyes narrowed. No, but ambitious ones do. Cassian's hand tightened at his side. Elara continued. Then let us discuss ambition. Marcus brought forward the forged letter. He placed the unfinished draft beside the copy Cassian had received before the wedding. The handwriting was confirmed by 3 independent clerks. Seraphine closed her eyes. Rowan looked toward her. State your role. Her voice shook when she began. I wrote the letter. Several alphas growled. Seraphine forced herself to continue. My father told me Elara intended to use the crown oath to seize control of military appointments. Elara looked at Gideon. Did I? No, Seraphine whispered. The hall went quiet. He ordered me to make Cassian believe she would. Cassian's face hardened. Gideon laughed softly. My daughter is frightened. She will say anything to save herself. Seraphine turned toward him. For years, she had shrunk beneath that tone. This time she didn't. You told me if I refused, you would cast Adrian out of Holt territory. Her father's expression changed. Only slightly. But everyone saw it. Seraphine swallowed. You told me Cassian would need me once Elara left. You said I would finally have a place you could not take from me. Gideon said nothing. Elara watched Seraphine carefully. The woman had harmed her. That truth had not changed. But neither had another truth. Seraphine had spent years learning that survival meant becoming useful to a powerful man. Elara understood the trap. Understanding was not forgiveness. Rowan motioned to Tessa. The altered territorial map was presented next. Then, the double taxation records. Then 3 more council directives carrying Gideon's authorization. Alpha Brenner Cole stood. So while our packs fought over land, council collected from both sides. Gideon's composure finally slipped. The crown benefited. Cassian stepped forward. No. Everyone turned. His voice carried without the alpha command. The council benefited from confusion. Gideon looked at him with open contempt now. You needed us. I trusted you. That was your weakness. The words landed hard. Cassian accepted them. That was my mistake. The hall shifted again. A king admitting fault was rarer than bloodshed. Gideon seized the opening. He pointed toward Elara. And now she returns carrying an extinct bloodline seal, surrounded by tribunal officials, with half the kingdom refusing you. His voice rose. Can none of you see what this is? Elara remained still. Gideon turned to the assembled alphas. She planned this. She wanted the crown weakened so she could control it. Cassian's wolf surged. Elara raised one hand. He stopped. She walked toward the black evidence table. Tessa placed the moon witness document before her. Elara rested her palm beside the ancient seal. If I wanted Cassian's throne, she said, I would not need to manipulate anyone. The room became completely still. Rowan spoke. Explain. Elara looked toward the 11 alpha representatives. Moon Witness Authority permits me to suspend recognition of the crown if a royal oath is corrupted by concealed council interference. Several men shifted in their seats. Gideon stared at her. Elara continued. If I invoke that right today, Cassian keeps White Crown Pack. She looked at him, but he loses legal command over the other 10 until review concludes. Gideon's face changed. He finally understood. Elara had the weapon he had spent months trying to manufacture, and she had not used it. Alpha Jonah stood. Will you? Elara looked around the hall. At the leaders, at the guards, at Seraphine, at Cassian, then at Gideon. No, a ripple of shock moved through the room. Gideon barked a laugh. Coward. Elara turned toward him. No, her voice remained quiet. I refuse to punish thousands of wolves because one king was arrogant and several elders were corrupt. Cassian took the blow without flinching. Elara lifted the original crown document. I will recognize the crown conditionally. Gideon's smile vanished. Under what terms? Council emergency powers are suspended. Rowan began recording. All altered territorial rulings receive independent review. Another stroke of the pen. Crown mobilization requires pact countersignature until reforms are ratified. Cassian looked at her. She met his eyes, and the office of High Arbiter becomes independent of the throne. The great hall erupted. Some alphas objected. Others approved. Gideon shouted over them. You cannot rewrite the kingdom because your husband humiliated you. Elara's head turned slowly. No. The hall settled again. I am rewriting it because men like you counted on humiliation, making me disappear. Gideon's face went red. Rowan struck the floor once. Order. Cassian stepped away from the throne. I accept. Marcus looked at him sharply. Cassian did not hesitate. I accept every condition. Gideon stared at him, as if he had lost his mind. Cassian looked only at Elara, not like a king looking at his Luna, like a man who finally understood the distance between authority and trust. Tribunal guards moved toward Gideon. For the first time, he resisted. You think this ends with me? No, Elara said. It ends with the records. Tessa closed the final ledger. The evidence was enough. As Gideon was escorted from the hall, no one followed him. Seraphine remained behind. So did Cassian. The trial was nearly over. The marriage was not. Cassian reached slowly into the inside pocket of his coat. Elara saw the movement. So did everyone else. He opened his hand. The Luna ring rested in his palm. Then, before the 11 pack representatives, the council, the tribunal, and the woman he had betrayed, Alpha King Cassian Thorne went down on one knee. No command entered his voice. No royal authority. Only a question. Elara. Her chest tightened. Will you let me earn the right to ask you to come home? She looked at the ring, then at him. For the first time since the wedding night, Cassian was not asking what his Luna owed the crown. He was asking what, if anything, he still deserved from the woman beneath the title. Cassian remained on one knee. No one in the great hall moved. The Luna ring rested in his open palm, pale moonstone, catching the cold light from the high windows. Elara looked at it for a long moment. That same ring had felt heavy on her hand only days earlier. A symbol of duty, belonging, promise, then humiliation. Now it looked smaller than she remembered. Cassian lifted his eyes. I am not asking you to forget. Elara's throat tightened. Good, because she could not. I am not asking you to forgive me today. Better. His fingers closed slightly around the ring. I am asking whether there is anything left for me to earn. The mate bond pulled between them. Not violently, not like the tearing pain that had followed her beyond White Crown's walls. This was quieter, more dangerous, because some part of her still loved him. That truth had survived anger, distance, evidence, even humiliation. Elara hated nothing about herself for that. Love was not the same thing as permission. She stepped toward him. Cassian's breathing changed. Elara held out her hand. He placed the Luna ring in her palm. For 1 second, hope crossed his face. Then she closed her fingers around it, instead of putting it on. Stand up. Cassian obeyed. Not because she used authority, because she asked. The difference mattered. Elara looked around the great hall. Gideon Holt had already been removed under tribunal guard. The remaining council members sat silent, their former confidence stripped away by the records stacked in front of them. Rowan Mercer stood near the evidence table. Tessa Wynne was organizing the sealed ledgers. Seraphine remained beside the witness bench. She looked smaller now, not innocent, just exposed. Rowan struck the floor once with the tribunal staff. The court will enter final sanctions. Gideon's seat on the Royal Council was revoked permanently. His assets tied to falsified territorial collections were frozen pending restitution to Iron Vale and Pine Hollow. The 2 elders proven to have joined his emergency control plan were suspended and ordered into formal review. No execution, No theatrical punishment. Records. Restitution. Removal of power. Elara preferred it that way. Death could turn corrupt men into martyrs. Paperwork made them accountable. Seraphine's case came next. Rowan looked toward her. You forged crown evidence. You knowingly participated in an attempt to manipulate royal succession. Seraphine swallowed. Yes. You also provided material testimony establishing council conspiracy. Yes. Your Holt rank is revoked. Your personal inheritance remains frozen until the investigation concludes. Seraphine nodded once. Her eyes were wet, but she did not argue. Then she looked at Elara. For several seconds, neither woman spoke. I wanted what you had, Seraphine said, quietly. Elara's expression remained still. No, Seraphine blinked. You wanted what you thought I had. Security, recognition, a place no powerful man could take away. Elara understood that now. Seraphine looked down. I am sorry. Elara believed she meant it. That did not erase anything. I hope you become someone who does not need another woman removed to feel safe. Seraphine flinched, then nodded. It was the closest thing to mercy Elara could honestly offer. The great hall slowly emptied as afternoon faded. The Alpha representatives departed, carrying copies of the reform conditions. Council guards removed sealed evidence. Tessa disappeared toward the archives with enough work to ruin several months of sleep. Marcus found Cassian near the throne. You accepted the High Arbiter clause quickly. Cassian looked toward Elara. She was right. Marcus raised one eyebrow. I should write down the date. Cassian almost smiled. Almost. Then his expression changed. What happens to the Luna office? Marcus followed his gaze. That is not your decision alone anymore. Cassian nodded. I know. 3 days earlier, those words would have angered him. Now they sounded like the first honest thing he had heard about marriage in years. At sunset, Elara stood alone on one of the tribunal balconies, overlooking the valley. The rain had finally cleared. Clouds broke along the western horizon, exposing a strip of pale gold light. In her hand lay the Luna ring. Behind her, footsteps approached. She knew Cassian's gait before the bond even reacted. He stopped several feet away, not beside her, giving her room. Elara noticed that too. The reforms will pass, he said. Jonah agreed. Brenner demanded 2 additional tax audits. That sounds like Brenner. Cassian gave a quiet breath that might have been laughter. The warmth lasted less than a second. Then he looked at the ring. Are you going to keep it? Elara opened her hand. I don't know. His jaw tightened slightly, but he did not push. Progress. Rowan offered you High Arbiter. Elara looked toward the valley. He offered me the nomination. The packs still vote. They will choose you. You sound certain. I have recently become familiar with what happens when people underestimate your paperwork. Elara looked at him. A small smile almost betrayed her. Cassian saw it. He did not take advantage of it. That mattered too. His voice lowered. I should have listened. Yes. I should have believed you. Yes. I should never have gone to Seraphine. Elara's fingers tightened around the ring. No. Cassian swallowed. I cannot undo that night. No. Then tell me what I can do. She finally turned fully toward him. Live with what you did, without asking me to make it easier for you. The answer landed hard. Cassian accepted it. Elara continued. Respect the reforms when they inconvenience you. I will. Stop treating questions as disloyalty. I will try. Try harder. A faint, wounded smile touched his mouth. Fair. The bond warmed. Elara hated how easily her body remembered him. But now, she also knew memory did not own her. Cassian looked at her hand. Do I have any chance? She considered lying. A clean no would have been easier. For both of them. But Elara had spent enough time around false evidence. She would not manufacture emotional certainty simply because it sounded stronger. I don't know. Cassian breathed in slowly. That is better than no. Do not turn it into yes. I won't. She believed him. For now, a second set of footsteps sounded behind them. Rowan appeared at the balcony entrance carrying a sealed document. He saw Cassian. Cassian saw him. Neither man reacted like an idiot. Elara appreciated that more than either would ever know. The nominations are complete, Rowan said. He held out the document. Elara Vale has been formally proposed as the first independent High Arbiter of the Crown. Elara took it. Cassian looked at the seal, then at her. Congratulations. No bitterness, no possessiveness, just respect. Something inside Elara loosened. Not healed, not forgotten, loosened. Rowan left them there without lingering. Cassian glanced after him once. Elara noticed. Don't. I didn't say anything. You thought loudly. That time Cassian actually laughed. Quietly. It sounded almost like the man she remembered before crown politics made arrogance feel necessary. Almost. The next morning, Elara stood outside the tribunal chamber, as representatives prepared to vote. Dawn spilled across the stone floor, the same hour she had once left her Luna ring on an untouched wedding bed. She opened her hand. The ring caught the light. For a moment, she imagined putting it back on, not because Cassian demanded it, not because the kingdom needed it, because she might choose it one day. Maybe. Then she slipped the ring into the pocket of her coat, not her finger. Cassian stood at the end of the corridor. He did not approach. Rowan waited by the tribunal doors. Neither man called her. Elara smiled faintly. For once, no one was telling her where to stand. She walked toward the chamber, past Cassian, past the old expectations, toward the position she had earned before she ever became anyone's Luna. Cassian watched her go. This time, he understood that, if she ever turned back, it would not be because a bond dragged her home. It would be because she chose him again. And if she never did, he would still have to become the man who deserved the lesson losing her had taught him. Elara reached the tribunal doors. She paused. Her hand rested briefly over the ring hidden in her pocket. Then she stepped inside. She had left White Crown at dawn because one man had chosen another woman. She walked into the next dawn knowing no crown, no bond, and no ring would ever make that choice for her again. So this is where Elara's story closes. If you're still here with me, then maybe something in her journey felt familiar. Not the crowns or the ancient laws, but the quieter part. Being betrayed by someone you trusted, being misunderstood, feeling pain so deep that begging would have been easier than walking away. Elara did not leave because she stopped caring. She left because caring was no longer enough reason to abandon her dignity. That matters. We cannot control who disappoints us, who lies to us, or who chooses us too late. We can control what we do next. We can choose not to become cruel. We can choose not to chase people who only see our value after losing access to us. And we can choose to rebuild our lives without pretending the pain never happened. Elara still loved Cassian. She simply stopped allowing that love to make decisions for her. That may be the hardest kind of strength. If this story spoke to you, leave one word in the comments. Dignity. And if you enjoyed Elara's journey, a like, share, or subscribe would mean a lot. There are more stories ahead.